In a short span of 12 months, Cleantech has gone from a no name in the fluorspar space to become a dominant, if not one of the largest fluorspar holding in the United States. Fluorspar price right now trades around $600 a ton CIF delivered to the United States. And the price has gone from less than $100 a ton in the early 2000s. The price has gone up more than 5 times. We could be potentially making shipments to US domestic customers in sometime 2027 if we're able to find a toll mill opportunity, or into 2028 when our own plant becomes operational. Demand for United States to go up at least 200 to 300% in the next 3 to 5 years.
Today we're having a chat with John Lee, the CEO of Cleantech Vanadium Mining Corp, an exciting critical mineral explorer and developer specifically in fluorspar and vanadium. John, it's great to have you on the channel today and very excited to dive into your company. So why don't we start with an overview of what Cleantech CTV is really all about?
Stein, thank you very much for the invite. I think it's the first time I've been on your show. I'm much belated. I've watched some of your other esteemed guests, including Colin Kettle, which I have held very high regard, and we actually talked, and he is involved in some of our transactions. Cleantech Vanadium is a company that's been around for about a decade, but when IPO'd through a spin-out a couple of years ago. It is a highly specialized critical minerals company focusing on for projects in the United States. We started out as a vanadium mining company and and right now in Nevada, amassed one of the largest vanadium holdings in the United States, and then ventured into embark upon this new initiative, Fluorspar, just about a 1 year anniversary, and which is all to do with artificial intelligence and energy storage and energy production. So in short, it's all about bringing on this new AI renaissance and provide the necessary power to fill this new boom.
Yeah, and I would love to continue on that train of thought. What is fluorspar really, and what is it used for?
Right, fluorspar is one of the critical minerals as classified by the U.S. Geological Survey. And it is actually used for over 170 applications. It is it is the most reactive element in the periodic table. So think of it like a Victoria's Secret model. Even the nerdy as the bookworm is attracted to it. And that's why fluorspar, which is the native form, but once you that's how the fluorine or hydrofluoric acid is created from, and it's the HF that actually dissolves your yellow cake for some of your uranium investors, and to gasify, levitate uranium into gaseous form, and from there you put it in kind of like a dryer to spin for the U-235 to be separated from U-238, and that's the U-235. That's the fissile uranium of which has been used as a fuel for nuclear reactors and nuclear fusion. 6 fluorine goes into 1 uranium, so you need 6 times more fluorine to go into for every uranium yellow cake that you dig out of the ground. Similarly, fluorspar, fluorine once married to other very reactive element like lithium, produces a very stabilized medium. So it is used for the manufacture of electrolyte. Hexafluorophosphate is the de facto industry standard for electrolyte in your EV batteries and solar energy storage devices to complement your solar energy and other renewables. So in a way, Elon Musk talked about nickel being 4 years ago should be called lithium batteries should be called nickel batteries, because nickel occupies the cathode, which is now being replaced by iron. And on the anode side, people talk about graphite being on the anode, but people don't talk about fluorine, which actually 6 times more fluorine goes into lithium batteries than the lithium itself. And then there's so many applications to go over, but if we just say on this modernization thing of technology, fluorine is also, HF is also is a indispensable and critical element in the production of semiconductors. In that fluorine is married with all the exotics like germanium and gallium as a carrier agent. And once they go into the chamber, fluorine gas is used to etch the silicon wafer to the specific fine patterns, along with argon gas, a lot of exotic gases. And towards the end, once the pattern is etched and the semiconductor is created, fluorine gas is used to clean the chamber, so it's where all the impurity. And there's a lot of applications also for example, hydrofluorocarbon is what you use for refrigerant. It has a very low boiling temperature, so that when the hydrofluorocarbon liquid enters into your room, it boils and absorbs the energy, and it becomes a gas, and then gets piped out, and then compressed again into liquid, and that's how your room gets cooled. And then there's also hexafluoride sulfide, and that is a very inert gas for all the high electrical voltage switches. That is the gas that sits between the electrodes to prevent and to turn on, turn off your switches. And last but not least, there's also fluorines used for Teflon. Again, this is another form of hydrofluorocarbon to create that layer of non-stick pans, and that is also similar layers is created for all your solar panels to prevent erosion. So all in all, it's a bit like Robin to the Batman. You don't know, but you cannot do without. And not to mention, last but not least, you cannot talk about critical minerals without talking about China, of which China is the largest producer of fluorspar, but now has turned into a net importer of fluorspar since 2023. And that's why the price trend is steadily fivefold, but recently, in the last 3 years, it's gone up. The trajectory is steepening, and with the over 50% increase in the fluorspar price. Coincidentally, also that just like rare earth, the United States does not produce any fluorspar at this point in time.
John, those are definitely some very interesting use cases there. And like you outlined, of course, just like almost any other critical mineral, this sector is also dominated by China. Now they've turned into an importer, so we're in a structural bull trend. How does supply and demand currently balance? Do we have insights into that?
They don't really balance. That's why the price has gone up 50%. Fluorspar price right now trades around $600 a ton CIF delivered to the United States. And the price has gone from less than $100 a ton in the early 2000s. The price has gone up more than 5 times. Annual production of fluorspar is 10 million tons, and of which China produced 6 million tons, along with Mongolia produced 1 million tons. So even with 7 million tons, of which is the market share of China, is still not consuming enough. Just exactly because they are being building all those solar farms for their own AI initiative and energy transition. They discovered that they have to have solar and renewable is the largest energy source, sort of the fastest growth in energy production. And now they're creating these massive gigawatt batteries, of which require fluorspar. And also the uranium initiative, nuclear initiative also require fluorspar. Mexico is the third largest producer in the world, and that clocked in at around 1 million tons. Then you have some parts of Africa and Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, that made up the rest of the 2 million tons. United States right now solely rely on the Mexican fluorspar for majority for its usage, of which right now United States is burning about or consuming about 500,000 tons of fluorspar. So that's not even 1/10 of what China is consuming. For this current administration's initiative or dream of becoming energy independent, creating its own steel, aluminum plants, of which you also need fluorspar as the fluxing agent to eat away the impurities and create the layer to prevent oxidation. So think about it. You need steel plants, aluminum plants, big battery farms. You want to create your own batteries for your EV vehicles, and you want to build transmission lines to transmit those power. And you want to have a second nuclear renaissance, and you need weaponry, and then you need pharmaceuticals. All of that all together, it's not inconceivable to see that the demand for the United States to go up at least 200 to 300% in the next 3 to 5 years, and that is only 1/3 of one-third of what China is consuming today. And I would even say the fluorspar fundamental is even more bullish than rare earth, in that China has over 60 years of rare earth reserves, but China has less than 10 years of fluorspar. And that's why if you were to Google China and fluorspar, you'll see China is making a lot of headlines in Africa, try to secure additional resources, because in a way they're competing with the United States and the rest of the world, like the Asian countries, and also Europeans, to secure their fluorspar supply in order to continue a number of highly critical mission applications.
Excellent. And that, of course, brings us to your project now, which is potentially located in a very interesting commodity. You outlined earlier that there's no current producers in America, I believe, or even North America. I'm not entirely sure. However, it does seem like there were some past producers which you might have in your district here.
Cleantech is one of, I would think one or two companies with exposure to fluorspar mining in the United States. So we're one of the, I mean, there's only two choices in our view, and our peers has been talking about commissioning to production, but hasn't yet in parts of Western United States. I know that much of your audience is into gold. I had a sort of a quick preview. The way you think about it is the Battle Mountain to gold is like Kentucky, Illinois fluorspar district for fluorspar. 90% of the U.S. fluorspar production came from this district, of which it measures around 600 square miles. So it's a big area. I mean, you can see the scale there. You know, that's a five mile bar. So if you extrapolate that, the area is around 25 miles by 25 miles. This is where all the fluorspar came from up till the Second World War into the late 70s. And mainly fluorspar at the time used for a lot of chemical applications, and also for weaponry in steel and aluminum production. The production stopped in this district in the late 70s when China started flooding the market with the cheap fluorspar, and the U.S. sold its strategic stockpile in early 2000 because they think all commodities are barbaric relic. The tide has definitely turned in that the United States just tendered a $200 million fluorspar deal to restock the national strategic stockpile. And there is no inventory of fluorspar that we know to speak of. So it has reached a critical stage and it's being recognized by all the major fluorspar consumers and as well as U.S. government. And what you look at here with all the names are a collection of projects that's under Cleantech's control. So in a short span of 12 months, Cleantech has come from a no name in the fluorspar space to become a dominant, if not one of the largest fluorspar holding in the United States, both in terms of size, which is 17,000 acres, equivalent to the size of Manhattan, and also in terms of resource potential, in that over 740 drill holes had occurred on our property over 150 years. And that there is a documented historical resource in the millions of tons and maybe exceeding 10 million tons. Keep in mind, however, these are all based on historical reports. They're not 43101 or modern standards. And our job, and should not be relied on in terms of economics, but one of our job is to, over time, through time, to validate these resources. And so we're now one of the large. If you look at the maps, right, all Cleantech is of the 17,000 acres. There's over a dozen distinct deposits, and they're all sitting on critical mineral trends. It's a very exciting story, and there's a lot of work to do as we're sifting through terabytes of data that dated back to 150 years ago.
So how should we think about how this district formed from a geological perspective? Is it along these fault lines that are running parallel, which is why we're seeing these pink lines all over your area?
Well, you're asking a little bit over my payload. I'm not a qualified geologist. However, fluorspar is not like a copper, right? You can just like walk on the side of the road and make a copper discovery. And that's why you see that fluorspar is concentrating on very specific parts of the region in China, in northern part of China, in Mongolia, and in Mexico, and in parts of Africa, and also this very specific district in Illinois, Kentucky. I don't have answers to your specific questions other than that there is a lot of fluorspar. And not only fluorspar, but there's also a lot of other exotics. We've seen documentation of germanium, gallium, and also the existence of thorium, which is the sister of uranium. And then, but not least, one of the largest rare earth deposits, rivals the size of the ones in California, sits in Illinois, of which we have surrounded the area. The name is Hickstone. Reportedly has over 30 million tons of heavy rare earth. But comes away, the issue is metallurgy, because this is primarily a fluorspar deposit, and then the rare earth was maybe has some difficulty being separated out of fluorspar. But in terms of fluorspar, the area has documented production of over 10 million tons, and the metallurgy is well known. I don't know the origin other than that there is a lot of fluorspar, and we are still continuing on our acquisition trail in parallel with our accelerated plan to put one of our projects into production.
That is incredibly interesting. Perhaps we can talk about the work that you outlined earlier on that you plan to do in these projects. There's quite a bit of information already there from historical data, like you outlined, not on NI 43101 standards, but still data you can use to, channel an exploration campaign. So what are you planning to to do here on the exploration front, and you mentioned putting something into production. How should one visualize that as a long-term goal?
Right. We asked the same question because the area is so humongous, and it's only been a year since we embarked upon this initiative, acquired the first project in July, and the acquisition kept on going from July, August, September up to November. The way you think about it, think of our land package as the size of Manhattan. And then you have different hotspots, right? Like Central Park, Union Square, Times Square, Chelsea, Brooklyn, and Liberty Tower, and the Statue of Liberty. So this is a good analogy to what we have, because every one of this district has their own very unique characteristics, but they have all of these areas could turn into a world-class fluorspar mining operation. That would be enough to supply a decade's loan of the need of the United States. And I'm very confident this is a generational district that once well developed can supply the fluorspar needs of the United States for generations to come. So the question is, and that's why we've been doing quite a bit of homework in the last 6 months, Stein, because we don't want to make the mistake of going on this. Some of your companies have been drilling, right, for 10, 20 years and still haven't get an ounce out of the ground. That is not, let me be clear, our objective. And our objective and the mandate is very clear. There's no gaslighting. There's no grand gesturing or grandiose storytelling. It is all about getting this stuff out of the ground as soon as possible. The reason being is, as I mentioned, a ton of fluorspar is priced at $600, and that is 97% calcium fluoride. The calcium fluoride coming out of the ground, you see, for example, the first one, Campbell Crosser, average is 37% CaF2. And some of the higher grade, this is average, some of the higher grade areas is in excess of 50%. So that means the stuff coming out of the ground is already exceeding $300 a ton, rivaling some of the open pit gold project in Nevada. They're gagging over $1 billion market cap of 0.5 grams, around $80 a ton of stuff coming out of the ground. So there's no beating around the bush. We're trying to get this stuff out of the ground as soon as possible. To put a mine into production is not an easy fare. There's all the different elements into it: the mine plan, the processing, the transportation, logistics, community relations. So we have spent a lot of time doing homework and very rigorous evaluation of all of our land holdings and project and district. And now we've come to a conclusion of picking the right project of these portfolio of deposits into production, of which we're going to make a news release very shortly. We have assembled a world-class team, the guys that specialize in mining production, in the name of Jason Reed, who's a very good friend of mine, and he's put mines into production in Nevada and Mexico and generated over $1 billion in dividend. And we also signed on some of the very specialized people in Kentucky to put the mine into production in terms of permitting. And Kentucky is one of the, I would say, even more mining friendly than Nevada. We met with the Kentucky permitting people. They say, what, we're ready to drill, and how do I get a permit? And they were dumbfounded. They're like, well, if your project is on private land, which it is not part of the Bureau of Land Management in the United States. And why would you need my permission to dig a hole? I was like, yeah, you're right. So it reminds me of Nevada. That's 100 years ago. Before the federal government gets involved. So we are ecstatic. We are thrilled to be operating in Kentucky. And the local communities are also very supportive. The state of Kentucky is very supportive. I understood the initiative of critical minerals, and they have extended histories of historic zinc production and fluorspar production and some of the coal production as well. So overall, the game plan is start a drill program within the next 60 days and just drill enough to know where we need to get the stuff out of the ground. So it's not an extended campaign to prove up millions of tons of fluorspar. And then also start our permitting process in going in parallel in the mine permitting and in the processing plant permitting. The mine permitting, we can potentially receive the go-ahead before the end of this year, interestingly enough, and of which we could start digging stuff out of the ground and then just to show the proof of concept, and then wait for the processing plant to complete the construction journey, which would be sometime in 2028, or possibly toll mill, right, through some of the known zinc processing mills, or repurposing some of the retired plants as well. So we could be potentially making shipments to U.S. domestic customers in sometime 2027 if we're able to find a toll mill opportunity, or into 2028 when our own plant becomes operational.
That's a very quick timeline from discovery to production potentially. So
Yes.
on the processing side, what type of plant would you be looking for? I guess if you can use a zinc mine or even a retired other type of mine, the processing plant flow sheet is very simple and straightforward.
Right, Stein, I just want to preface that I have over 25 years of experience in the mining industry. I started from the dot-com industry and 10 years as an investor, and then the latter 15 years is running a mining company. And so I financed over $200 million, raised over $200 million for my babies. And we've also spent 10 years permitting a project in Nevada for our Vanadium Project with the Bureau of Land Management on federal land. And we spent over $20 million in permitting. So we know when we say that we can put a mine in production in 12 months, we actually speak from somewhat qualified opinion and not just like a number on a handkerchief. And we're quite confident of achieving the objective. And that's what we're doing. A lot of homework. We just had a trip. We just made a trip in March in Kentucky. Now, in terms of metallurgy, we have also enlisted some of the fluorspar experts that are very familiar with the metallurgy. The way you float fluorspar is kind of like how you float a sulfide for gold or for silver. So in that, you grind the fluorspar to a certain size, and then from there, you crush it, you grind it, and then you do a conventional flotation, of which you then upgrade the fluorspar concentrate from, say, right now, say 40% to up to 97%. The reagents are different, obviously, from say your zinc or gold concentrate, in that they're all organic. And one of the key ingredients is bark tree, right? Because that's one of the elements that will be able to sort of bind the fluorspar away from the silicate and other impurities. So the process is conventional, it's well documented, it's not some exotic. It sounds exotic, but but the recovery and metallurgy and the flow sheet is well understood. In that you would get the stuff out of the ground, and then you would apply reagent, and you float the calcium fluoride, and then you collect the fluoride, and then which is a very inert element, and from there you would transport the calcium fluoride into what they call the hydrofluoric acid plant, of which they would apply sulfuric acid to separate the calcium from the fluorine, and to marry the fluorine with hydrogen to create the hydrofluoric acid. And that is a highly toxic, erosive element. If you just drop two drops of HF on your palm, you will die. And not because it burns a hole in your not because it burns a hole in your hand, which is a big deal, but that doesn't cause death. Because all the calcium gets of your body, all the mineral in your body, instantly all gravitated, right, and gets stick to that 2 drops of HF, of which is hard cardiac arrest, and that's why the HF then is very close to your uranium plants, semiconductor manufacturing, because you gotta minimize the travel distance of the HF to the end applications.
Wow, that's for sure a very reactive chemical. That's incredibly interesting. So when we think of this land package that you now already have acquired and that you're already or will continue to acquire over the next little while, if you were to strategically place a processing plant, could you potentially treat multiple mines within, a trucking distance?
Yeah, that is something we also talk about and think about. In the end, Stein, we just say, let's stop the analysis paralysis. Let's just get a plant situated next to the mine, and we're starting at a very modest 500 tons per day, which your audience would know would not cost hundreds of millions of dollars. There's good infrastructure. You can see the Ohio River, of which you can actually barge the calcium fluoride product through the Mississippi River down to Houston, and that's where all the major chemical factories and HF plants are. 500 ton per day plant. Potentially we don't even have to get this permitted through the Kentucky Mines and Reclamation and Enforcement, because they treat the processing plant like a factory, and that is outside of the jurisdiction of the mine per se, because you're not really doing the physical act of mining. And that's a good point you brought up, but right now we're not talking about a 3,000 ton per day operation that will cost you $300 million, but rather a modest 500 ton per day plant that will produce around 200,000 tons of raw fluorspar, and of which you're going to produce this N acid spar product, a 97% CaF2, at around 40 to 50,000 tons, and that will be around 10% of the current annual demand or usage in the United States. Interestingly enough, Stein, on the same note, that we're being approached by some of the world's some of the U.S. and obviously also some of the world's largest nuclear operator, some of the largest nuclear chemical producers in Teflon and refrigerant. We're being contacted, solicited by the world's largest auto manufacturers, semiconductor companies out of Korea, out of Taiwan, in Qatar, in United States, and Japan. And so even though we're a small micro-cap company, a production that maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 3 years away, but we're already making significant inroads in terms of visibility, and also shows the desperate nature of these companies looking to diversify away from supply from China and Mexico. If you were to care, just say where, like go to ChatGPT, where does Korea get its fluorspar? Where does Japan get its fluorspar? Where does Germany get its fluorspar? The answer all comes back to Mexico. And Mexico only has 1 million tons per year. It isn't enough to feed the orphans. And the tightening of the supply you can see already, because fluorspar Mexico used to be sold at a discount to China, but now given China is no longer competing for export with Mexico, you're seeing that Mexico, the discount Mexico into the United States has completely evaporated. And that just shows that the structural deficit is only going to continue as all this mission application, critical applications in AI, in energy, all these data centers. I mean, I want to talk briefly on this data centers. Florida's getting data centers, Carolinas and Michigan, Louisiana, Kentucky, and now they're talking about building a data center in Utah by Kevin O'Leary, and that's 9 gigawatts. I don't think people understood what 9 gigawatt means. Like Bruce Power, nuclear power plant in Canada, I think right now it's doing about 3 gigawatts, and that's after 20 years of expansion. To build a 1 gigawatt nuclear power plants, I don't think there's been one built in the United States in the last 20 years. It's going to cost you 10 years and $10 billion, because after Fukushima, a nuclear power plant has to withhold the impact of a 737. And there is no way to get a power plant of 1 gigawatt up and running within, say, 3 to 5 years. And the fastest way to go is solar. That is the only way. But for solar to work, you have to have batteries. And that's why you get all this data centers. They're not measured in number of GPUs, CPUs, or flops, or processing speed. They're measured interestingly in power. And if I could spend a minute just talk about this big freight train coming collision and Fluorspar. And the reason I say that is this: Nvidia. Remember, like 6 years ago, Apple, right? It clipped $1 trillion mark. Valuations. Oh my God! I never seen $1 trillion company before. But Nvidia now is $3 trillion. But the writing is being on the wall on this AI revolution for more than 2 years. I mean, Nvidia went from less than $1 trillion, right? It's going on rampage for last 3 years. And all of a sudden you see Micron that went from obscurity to now almost $1 trillion, went up more than 20 times in the last 12 months. So it just shows you how nearsighted sometimes the short-term thinking of our investor. I mean, surely if you believe the Nvidia story, once the data center got built, you have to put memory in there, right? So surely you should have bought Micron, or Micron should have gone up along with Nvidia years ago. But yeah, Micron started going, guess what? Okay, you have the chips, you have the stacks, you have the computers, you put the memory in there, and what's going to do next? You're going to turn on the switch, and they were going to realize there's no power. And now if you go to YouTube, there's a lot of complaint about AI because the ordinary communities have no power left. These tens of gigawatts, they're astounding type of numbers for people that are in the utility industry, and that you're gonna need, and collectively, $700 billion is gonna go into the data centers from Meta and Amazon and Oracle and Microsoft and Grok. Each one is $100 billion, and you're gonna see Fluorspar go into prices that are not even imaginable, Stein, because it is all about energy. So if you're bullish on uranium went from 20 or 10 when I started, and now it's trading 100. You have to be bullish at Fluorspar, and that's why I say Fluorspar right now, price at 600, can easily triple in the next 3 years. And in terms of prices per pound, I mean 600 per ton, Fluorspar is at around 20-30 cents a pound. So there's still a lot of room to go, and it's one of the elements that's price inelastic because it's mission critical. So even if Fluorspar prices will triple to $1 a pound at $2,000, $3,000 a ton, it's still will be irreplaceable in all those applications.
Yeah, it's a great point on the upside, and of course it's not unprecedented in the critical mineral space. We've seen antimony and tungsten do significantly more than that, so it doesn't sound crazy. Now, while the upside picture is very clear if you're a Fluorspar producer and the price goes up 3 times, what about downside protection? Because when I look at your grades, they look very high. Is that truly the case compared to your peers in the global sphere?
Yeah, let's talk about peer comparison. There's not a whole lot of known fluorspar discoveries and deposits. Most of them are in China, in Mongolia, some in Vietnam, and some in Africa. And the grades, the recovery, the ability to upgrade the fluorspar to acid fluorspar, 97%, is highly correlated to the raw grades out of the ground. So the typical underground fluorspar mines range from 20% to 50%. And when you see a fluorspar deposit that goes below 20%, then you could have some issue in terms of recovery and metallurgy. So the projects under 20%, you can maybe refine up to recover up to 70 or 60% through flotation. And that fluorspar then will go into a fluxing agent rather than for these high-tech application. So you just chuck this fluorspar right into your aluminum and your steel smelters, and it's still going to be able to eat away all the impurities for the purpose of as a fluxing agent. And in terms of valuation, talk briefly about valuation, just like other critical minerals that you might have covered before, in lithium, in vanadium, US is always late to the game. I remember lithium in 2017, 2018. You see the writing on the wall of this EV revolution, yet this hard rock lithium companies in Quebec, in the United States, were going through bankruptcy, right? And same with rare earth, like some of these projects in California has been recycled twice out of bankruptcy. And so that's why you got to make sure you're the right timing, or being late, it just could be insufferable just as being wrong, actually. But nonetheless, there's not much waiting to do, because some of our comparables in Mongolia and Australia are trading 10 times of our valuation. They're collecting at around $20 to $30 per ton of fluorspar in the ground. So, one of the company we tracked that's in Australia late last year, I think this time last year, early 2025, they joint ventured with the Japanese company Sumitomo, and the market capitalization went from 100. Right now, they're close to $1 billion. Similar deposits, similar nature, but they require billions in infrastructure because they're nowhere in Australia. And similar projects in Mongolia, of which we have some presence in Mongolia for my sister company. And I could not find a fluorspar project for less than $20 million. And that's like a million tons, not even a million tons of resources. All because China and Mongolia, right? They're so close. You can go hop on a flight from Beijing in 2 hours. You land in Ulaanbaatar. And I was told that the Mongolians tell me that they've never seen the ferocious appetite from the Chinese, like for any other critical minerals. Like they will literally land in Ulaanbaatar, go on a site visit, and write like $1 million check within the same week to get some exploration claims of which they can drill. Like Chinese. So, I've been doing business with the Chinese for more than 2 decades. I'm from Taiwan. Sometimes they would drag and they would say face and they would say I'm interested and whatnot. And so that's a lot of frustration in dealing with Chinese investor occasionally. But for the stuff they really want, they're not going to have second guess about it, and they're going after fluorspar big time. And right now for Cleantech, our valuation is trading at $2 a ton of fluorspar in the ground based on historical resource. So if you believe we can eventually turn this historical resource at around 10 million tons into measured indicated, even just 20 or even just 10% of that, our valuation compared to our peers in Australia and Mongolia should be at 10 times, if not more than that. So I came out a number of programs when we started the initiative almost this time last year in July. And back then Cleantech was trading at 3 cents. And I said, this is a no-brainer, 10-bagger, no-brainer. And I don't say that ever in all of my appearances for past projects for other companies that I like. But the stock went from 3 cents to 50 cents. And now the stock is selling at 20 cents. And people say, well, it's already gone to a 5-bagger right from the start. But what is upside? Well, the upside is from 20 million, which we sit right now, to $1 billion. And as you mentioned, these antimonies and rare earth and lithium, if we just have a modest operation going, that's why we devised this 500 ton per day operation. and they're trading at $1 billion, $5 billion. It's not entirely inconceivable at all whatsoever. In fact, I would say the current price is an anomaly. There's the trajectory has a lot more upside to come from here.
And John, perhaps we can more clearly write down what the pathway would be from between here and then. What are your plans for the next few months, and how does that pathway from here to potentially being in production by 2027 or 2028 look like?
Yeah, we have a small company, but we have a terrific team of advisors, and all of our team are highly specialized and qualified, and they're good at what they do in permitting, in operation, in financing, and in operation. So there are two. As I mentioned to you, the mandate is to start production by this time of next year to get Fluorspar out of the ground, and then in parallel, getting the permit for a processing plant of 500 tons per day. But the construction of the plant may obviously take longer, about 18 months, if we get the permit within the next 12 months. So the way I look at it is we have two separate track of team that's going right now working. One is continue our mergers and acquisitions. Well, not mergers, but continue to acquisition. The lowest hanging fruit's already been gotten, but we're looking at such terrific assets that it would do the world injustice if we don't, or to our shareholders injustice if we don't continue this acquisition trial, of which we can acquire something for $1 million and turn that value into tens of millions of dollars, literally, as we have done and demonstrated in the last 12 months. So that acquisition activity is continuing. We continue to evaluate great world-class assets. And at the same time, we have a separate team that's doing the permitting and then putting the mine into production. And within that, we separated out the mining permitting away from the plant permitting. So we don't want anything on the plant processing permitting side to interfere or to delay the permitting for the mine. And based on our extended conversation with permitting experts in Kentucky, talking to Kentucky permitting agencies, and talking to the locals, and looking at all the historic documents, some of them already has a mine plan in place that they have devised 50 years ago, right before the activity was shut down due to the flooding of the Chinese fluorspar exports, that we were confident of getting the necessary requisite authorizations and permits to begin digging this time next year. So the key here is, and that's why we came on your program, is now we have done our homework. We're going to tell the world of a very clear roadmap and schedule and milestones to put the mine into production. So the various different baseline activities, permitting, mine plan, and all of that is going to come to fruition in the next 12 months, I would say.
It does sound like an incredibly exciting roadmap. So how do the finances of this look like? How are your finances currently looking like, and what are your expected capital outlays on the short term? And do you have enough to cover that?
Yeah, it's going to be in the tens of millions of dollars to get the mine into production. It's not in the hundreds of millions of dollars. We have I've raised over $200 million for mining companies before, and we have people that knows how to mine projects, digging stuff out of the ground. The company has currently about $1 million cash in treasury. Certainly is not enough. So the plan is, to be honest, and you've talked to many junior company, is continue this path, right? It's a little cliche, but to de-risk the market. Our market cap went to almost 100 million, not even like 6 months ago. So the important message I want to convey to your audience is this is not a sort of a gaslighting story of painting the big pictures of the things that we could do, but rather things that we are going to do. So we're not going to we're going to conserve as much as we possible to do the absolute necessary to do for the drilling to get 100,000 tons of materials proven. And we're going to do all that we needed to get the permitting work completed and submitted. And we have a lot of in-house experts, so we don't have to rely on say the sort of the auditor in the technical industry to put the stamp of approval, because it's very, very expensive every step along the way. But rather, we're gonna conserve it and continue to raise money when we need. We have a very loyal set of shareholders. So obviously, I would say the only potential impediment towards production is excessive dilution, right? We're confident we can raise the money. And also being approached, as I mentioned to you, a number of strategic large-scale off-takers, their market cap not in the billions, but in the hundreds of billions. So the question is, as I mentioned, is it's not so much the project is financeable or not, but to demonstrate that, like, the issue is not so much like is there enough money, right, to go into the sector? But the rather is like, can we demonstrate without a doubt that we can get stuff shipped to you by a certain time? And if so, I don't believe that there's questions about whether the mine can be financed. I mean, case in point, the U.S. Exim Bank, U.S. Department of Commerce and Department of Defense has over $30 billion available for critical minerals company. And they've invested hundreds of millions in equity and putting in billions of dollars in debt package to finance critical mineral development in the United States. And they've just pledged $3 billion for a zinc operation, only about an hour drive from where we are, in order to build out a germanium gallium module to process some waste trace mineral materials. So you got economically, mathematically, it doesn't make any sense, but it makes a lot of sense in that like Jack Curry, one of the famous oil analysts from Goldman Sachs and now for Carlyle says, you cannot quantify number of projects based on economics like a dollar, but you have to quantify based on volume. Like when something volume is absolutely required, the numbers, the economics will take care of itself. But not to mention that, as I said before already, that economics already work highly in our favor at the current Fluorspar price. So it's a matter of putting the pieces together and knocking them down one by one. And I'm very, very confident based on the people and the investors we talk to, that the valuation gap will be bridged between us and our peers in Australia and China. So the key here is, as I mentioned, this is not a gold deposit that we're going to just prove up 30 million tons of Fluorspar and continue to talk about some phantom production timeline. But rather, as we start drilling, digging, getting the permits approved, people are going to see a clear path towards production with a degree of certainty, of which I think what you're going to see is some of the institutions and some of the big investors are going to see the light turn from red to yellow to green. And then you're going to see the same effect that on the stock that has happened with Rare Earth, went from bankruptcy to like $10 billion. The stock went from like $2 to $70. Like Micron is another example. Nvidia is another example, right? So as I mentioned to you in the past, it was a 10-bagger when the stock is 3 cents, and I still continue to see another 10-bagger from where we're at 20 cents. And even at 10-bagger, we're at $200 million market cap. Is still a catwalk compared to some of the critical mineral mining companies focusing in the United States.
Really appreciate the additional color. Can you very quickly walk us through your cap table, roughly how many shares are outstanding and who owns them?
Yeah, the company is right now trades around $20 million market cap, 150 million shares outstanding, trading about 15 cents a share. Over, I would say 60% of the shares are held by insiders. The company Cleantech was spun out of Silver Elephant, of which that's the company I founded 15 years ago. And so Silver Elephant was spun out 3 years ago. Yeah, it's coming out 3 years ago. And half of those shares would dividend out to Cleantech shares from Silver Elephant, right? They would dividend out to Silver Elephant shareholders. So these shareholders we know them well, and I was 40, 50, 60, around 60, 70 million shares out of the 150 are kept by insiders. So very tight cap table. We don't have a penny stock options. They were all exercised, and so a very clean cap table. And it's a relatively new company. The share is very tightly held.
And John, this is all very exciting on the Fluorspar side, but we haven't even touched base on your Vanadium project just yet, which is also incredibly exciting. Perhaps we can just have a short overview from your side, really, what this project is all about.
Right. Vanadium price is going through a bit of a challenging time in the last 5 years. And that's why I would say I've been around the critical minerals industry like for more than 10 years, way ahead because of my .com background. And a lot of the elements are getting reinvented, right? Vanadium is one, Fluorspar is one with that energy storage, and rare earth is one as well. I would just say investors got to be careful when you associate a critical mineral with a specific hot topic like AI or energy storage. So unfortunately, vanadium is one of those, even though quite a bit of vanadium goes into batteries, but vanadium, 80% vanadium go to construction. And so if construction catches a cold, then vanadium prices, is sitting in the basement. This Vanadium project is a testament of our ability, Cleantech's ability to execute, of which we take a very small project called Capitalisation, and we expanded the deposit to 21-kilometer strike in Nevada, in Battle Mountain. So it is also like fluorspar, what we call the generational asset. You see there's tens of millions of tons of fluorspar, and we speculate the entire trend is connected. And all the hills were just the intrusions of the fluorspar, but the underground, there's tens of millions of tons of vanadium in there. But there is already a historical resource, I think, sitting at around 10 million tons. The project has its own water and sage credits in that we bought a farm. So all in all, the project is shovel ready, what I call shovel ready. It received the positive record of decision in 2023 from the Bureau of Land Management. I believe that we're the only junior company the only junior company in the world that actually received a record of decision from Bureau of Land Management, and that's taken us around 10 years to do. And but that doesn't mean to say if you spend 20 million 10 years you can get it. It's a insurmountable challenge that we had to overcome, and just shows our ability and expertise in navigating the permitting landscape in the United States. So right now the project has received all the key state and federal permit, and we're just waiting for the higher vanadium prices to commence our operation. It is a heap leach project, and strip ratio of 0.4 to 1. So it's literally, the reclamation is literally moving a pile of removing the hill and putting on another pile of the hill, and to put a flower on it on the reclamation. So it's a very, very exciting project. It's the best vanadium project on earth. I know so because I've been in the critical minerals in the last 15 years. And that we just got to wait for higher tick of vanadium prices for this project to sitting from a dormant status to become the single mine supplier in the United States. U.S. does not produce vanadium out of the ground per se, but it does have recycling plant where you have the spent ash, catalyst, oil waste from all over the world and into a refinery plant in United States. But this process is very pollutive and very dirty. So we look forward to supplying. Cleantech is looking forward to supply vanadium as well as fluorspar in United States. Well,
John, this has been incredibly insightful and interesting. How can anyone find out more or reach out to Cleantech?
Visit us, Cleantech CTV. We're trading on the TSX Ventures. The symbol is CTV, and on the OTCQX or QB is a CTVFF. We would have traded sometimes during the heydays, craze in last November. When rare earth and everything was going crazy, the Department of War making announcements, we traded like 30 million shares in a month, like literally 50% of our float on 30, 40% of our float every month. So I see this as an incredible opportunity at these basement levels. Even the liquidity, you can still get liquidity, 500,000 shares quite easily to accumulate the shares, because as I mentioned to you, half the shares are stashed away by insiders. There's not a lot more to go around. And as we start telegraphing our plan, I think a lot of people will be very pleasantly surprised that we come from very obscure junior to setting out this very ambitious but achievable, tangible results to getting this stuff out of the ground and beginning our shipment to our future customers 2027 or by the latest 2028.
Well, certainly looking forward to the catalyst. John, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
And I look forward to be back at your show to update progress in the months and years to come. We're going to be around.
Excellent. Excellent. Appreciate it, John.